Welcome back to another weekly analysis video. This analysis is for the week of October 26th, 2025. As always, we'll start off with a weekly review of last week's price action and then move on into the analysis. Well, here we are. Our next objective, 25,515, was hit. It's exactly what we were looking for. We're still looking for 26,244, but we're going to gauge how we react in here now and then move forward as to what will happen next. We opened here October 20th, had an initial move down in the beginning of the week, and then a repricing higher into our objective of 25,515. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. I am expecting more movement higher on price, but I need to gauge what happens next at the high end of this premium in here. We're in the this range here between 24,786 and 25,515. So that's the range we're in, and we're at the higher end of it, the premium end. So we need to gauge what happens next. Now onto the hourly chart here. We see the open at 1800 Sunday, October 19th. We opened in this area in here, and recall in the analysis that I did for last week that I wanted to see price move through this area in here and target these highs and into 25,515. Now into Monday, we did propel through this area in here. Price consolidated on the high end, fell back and retraced a little bit into and swept this area in here, came all the way back down in the 24,786 and then rallied into 25,515. A little bit of a deeper retracement than what I would have liked to see, but nonetheless the price action did follow suit as to what I expected to happen. So now that we've created a new all-time high, we're going to gauge what happens in here and see if we continue even higher. Alright, moving into our 15-minute chart here. We have the open here, Sunday, October 19th. Again, the initial rally up into Monday. The consolidation on the premium end of this range here. Note the decline down. Now, admittedly, this was a retracement that was a little deep for my liking. I would have preferred it to see it stay at the middle of this range here, equilibrium, the 50 percentile of this particular range here. But instead, we targeted the stop run area relative to the 24,786 level and went to the extreme end of the range that we're working in. And the overall range that we're working in is between 24,786 and 25,515. So it targeted the extreme of that, and then it rallied higher into the intended direction that we were looking for. Okay? So now, going forward, what do I see into the future? Well, we're going to head on to that discussion now for the weekly analysis of next week. Alright, back into our daily chart now for the weekly analysis for the week of October 26, 2025. So price is currently here, and what I would want to see for this week is a continued move higher. Now, ideally price will stay above this range in here and not close in this candle that we've created on Friday. Okay? Price comes back into this area in here, staying above the equilibrium price point. That's ideally what it does. And then it rallies into here. And these are stop run areas. This area in here, this area in here, relative to the 25,515 level. Propels through this area in here and into the equilibrium price point of this range from 25,515 to 26,244. Okay? The equilibrium price point into here. Okay? We'll need to gauge what happens at that time before reaching 26,244. All right, so that's what I'm looking for going into next week is continued higher prices with an initial drop down into here. Now, if it doesn't drop down at all, that is just really showing how bullish the Nasdaq 100 is. So again, that's what we'll be looking for going into next week. All right, now onto our hourly chart here. A little bit more of a refined and detailed view. I want to draw your attention into here where this gap is on this particular candle. Price can drop into that. I would prefer to see it stay above the equilibrium price point of this range in here, which puts it around here. So it keeps this gap from not being closed all the way in, but ideally it touches the top of this level in here if it were to drop down and then rally even higher into here, which this would actually be the objective for the week, is getting into here again, having very easy objectives to get to, low hanging fruit type scenarios. So this would be my next objective into here, seeing if it wants to just completely rally through here and then continue even higher towards our overall objective of 26,244. Okay. It's interesting to note also that with the expansion of this candle here, that was a CPI news release. Now, CPI was scheduled for Thursday, not Friday. So I find it interesting how they can just move these news events and these high impact numbers just around as they see fit. Again, the government is still shut down for the United States, so I find it interesting that they're rearranging everything as they see fit. Anyhow, higher prices is still in the cards for the Nasdaq, and again, I'm going to stay on this surfboard higher, this wave higher on my surfboard until it kicks me off. Alright, lastly, dialing into our 15-minute chart here, we see a more refined view compared to that of the hourly chart. Notice how we can see more of this gap in here located within this particular price range. So again, ideally price doesn't go below the equilibrium price point of this range in here. It could wick through there, but the bodies ideally stay above the equilibrium price point of that level if it were to drop down. Okay. Ideally it does drop down. That would give us a better entry for another propelled move higher. Now if it starts breaking down below this area in here, it will return to here and perhaps revisit this area in here. That I do not want to see that. That is not ideal for bullish prices. It could still move higher. It's still within the parameters of moving higher. It's just that in bullish markets you want to see the PD arrays that are nearest to the current price as prices here. So the nearest PD arrays, and PD arrays is what ICT talks about. He doesn't discuss around the levels of which they occur at, which I'll dive more into that, but the arrays that you're looking for are the closest that are relative to the current price action and where your current levels are. So the nearest one would be in here. Okay, we want to see the nearest PD arrays be supported by price. In this case, support higher prices. So with that being said, this should hold price, support it, and then allow it to rally. It should not be going through the nearest PD arrays or bullish PD arrays in this case. That would be indicative of maybe it's not so bullish, or not that I see this in the cards yet, but we could be turning the table because it could still come into here and still be bullish, but ideally it doesn't do that. So you're looking for signatures to support your main bias, which in this case my main bias is bullish, so that's what I'm going to stick to and keep on using the nearest PD arrays to be able to support my idea. So that's the whole premise behind that, of why I want to see this particular one hold rather than it come all the way down here and then propel higher. So again, to recap, it's the same theme as it has been for like the last 2 or 3 months. Higher prices on Nasdaq. So with that being said, that's going to conclude the weekly analysis for the week of October 26, 2025. As always, take care and God bless.